fines, there were suspensions. This series had everything, and it was so much more than basketball. And it was just amazing to me how the Nets were able to go out and punch the Sixers in the mouth in the first game on the road, go up 1-0, and then they just didn't have it. Games 2, 3, and 5 blown out of the water. They really should have won game 4 and tied it up at 2. I think that's what stopped the Nets from making it a series. But all in all, I am proud of what the Nets accomplished this year. I think they've gained some national recognition in the NBA. I think Karis LeVert's officially on the map as one of the nice young players coming up in this league. Jimmy Butler had some nice things to say about him. A lot of players chiming in that weren't in the playoffs had a lot of things to say about him. Jared Allen just turned 21 years old on Sunday. He'll be back in full force. I'm not going to get into the D'Angelo Russell situation too much because he's headed to restricted free agency. We have the entire offseason to break that down. But, you know, he wants to be back. We'll see what kind of money he wants. I'm hearing he's not taking any less than the max. But as far as this series is concerned, am I disappointed? Yes. But all in all, I am proud of what this team accomplished this year.
I think you should be. I think ultimately when you really stop, I had said this to you prior. I had said that, I thought it would be an interesting matchup with Embiid not looking healthy and the fact that the Sixers were a little discombobulated. But in terms of the on-court matchups, this was about the worst matchup that the Nets could have faced. And I think that as the series progressed, that really kind of revealed itself. I thought there were some really good highs for them, which were the play of their point guard triumvirate with Dinwiddie, Russell, and LeVert all playing really well in this series. And Jared Allen played really well in his role. He just couldn't handle Embiid.
He needs to get stronger. 100%. He needs to get in the gym and lift some weights.
And that's what it is. He's a great help side defender, and he's a great rim protector, but he's not a post defender. And truthfully, you don't really need to be much of a post defender in today's league. So I'm not going to knock him too much. There's not too many guys who you can consistently throw the ball down to in today's league and are going to get you those points. So I don't think that that's some massive flaw in his game. I think that, the play of Joe Harris was really disappointing in this series, and it reminded me a lot of watching the Atlanta Hawks with Kyle Korver years ago. When he was there, when you don't have guys who can consistently draw a double team, those shooters, it's just really hard for them to get the space to get good looks. And I think that's something that the Nets are going to have to really think about going into the next few years if they want to make the leap from this kind of, interesting, lovable underdog team to a real contender. They need to get players who command double teams. And unfortunately, I know we're not going to talk about Russell too much, but the way that his game is patterned, it's just not conducive to drawing a double team because most of his points come on the perimeter. So he's great at getting guys good looks, but at the same time, I don't know that when the defense tightens up that he's a guy who's going to get his teammates wide open looks left and right. I actually felt like LeVert did a better job in the series in that respect in finding the cracks in the Philadelphia defense and then either scoring or getting the ball out to his teammates. So I think that's something that the Nets really have to take a look at this offseason is, will this style that they're using, will it work as the playoffs come and teams are going to kind of key in on the things they like to do? Can they install some things? I think Atkinson has done a great job. It'll be a good opportunity for him to see if he can install some sets for when these defenses tighten up and the play gets a little bit more physical.
Oh, for sure. And I want to just cover a couple more things before we move on. The loss of Ed Davis, I don't think can be understated.
Yeah.
He checked Joel Embiid. I know Ed Davis is not, a premier center in this league, but he's one of the best rebounding centers. He's a great teammate, great locker room guy. He did a great job guarding Joel Embiid in game 1. Mm-hmm. And other than him, the Nets didn't really have anybody else to guard Joel Embiid. So him spraining both of his ankles, one in game 1 and the other one in game 2, didn't play in game 3, 4, or 5. So the Nets were definitely feeling his loss. Jared Dudley missing game 2 with the calf injury, honestly, was a bit more valuable than a lot of people let on. But this was Karis LeVert's coming out party regardless. I think he put the NBA on notice, and I'm really impressed with that. Just want to say one quick thing about Kenny Atkinson, especially our buddy Christian, who I went to game 3 with. By the way, absolutely electric atmosphere in Barclays Center. I walked by the Ben Simmons missing poster outside the arena. That was hilarious until he shut everybody up with his triple double. But I just want to say that Atkinson made some good adjustments. You know, he listened. He started LeVert. He benched Rodions Kurucs and Damari Carroll, and LeVert almost led the Nets to a Game 4 victory, a game in which they nearly dominated for the entire thing. So Atkinson, I think, grew as a coach. Definitely a lot to look forward to as far as him and his assistant coaching staff will getting extensions. I think most of the staff will be back next year. But I just want to get your take real quick on the extracurricular activity, the scuffle, if you will. Joel Embiid fouling Jared Allen for the second time. The Nets were calling for it to be a flagrant 2 for a second time. And then Jared Dudley defending his teammate, and then Jimmy Butler getting involved. Dudley and Butler both get ejected. The Nets lose thanks to Mike Scott, who came from Dunder Mifflin to hit a game-winning 3. I know that joke's been said everywhere. But
I mean, I felt like, to be honest, the first one was a little overblown. I thought it was just kind of one of those moves where a guy spins and kind of just hits a guy, and I don't think it was really intentional. The second time was a little bit worse. I don't know that he should have been ejected. I didn't love in the first game that they did the flagrant for him and then the flagrant for Kurucs. I just thought, kind of let those guys play. I do think, though, that this is forming a bit of a rivalry for the Nets and the Sixers because, these teams do not like each other. And I'm interested to see if they meet again. I think one thing that Coach Atkinson might take back if he could do it again, and I said this to you from game 1 all the way through, all 3 of his point guards played less than 30 minutes a game, Jason. Karis LeVert played under 29 minutes. Russell played almost 30 minutes, and Dinwiddie only played 26 minutes a game. They were getting a lot of really nice looks. Heck, even Shabazz Napier was playing well in the series, and it felt like some of the wings on their team, the Kurucs, the Carrolls, and even Dudley, were really not very effective on the offensive end. And I thought he didn't go to that enough. I thought he didn't put the ball in the hands of his best players. I loved that he got Hollis Jefferson out there once Rondé showed that he could really play in this series. But I felt like he gave Joe Harris a little bit too much rope, and he didn't give some of his best players enough minutes in this series, and it worked for him in the regular season, but I think it kind of ended up biting him when the postseason came, and that would be my one thing, Jason. I wanted to get your thoughts on this because we talked a lot about it. Did you feel like he should have gone more to those 3 point guards on his roster?
Absolutely. I think Kenny started to realize that, Russell, Dinwiddie, and LeVert did play more, but it was too little too late. The Nets did not have an answer for Embiid. Tobias Harris, after being non-existent in game 1, had 3 great games in a row.
Yeah.
Jimmy Butler showed that he can carry a team. And then you have the play of Ben Simmons, which I know he's not, too well received in most NBA circles. He's a great athlete, can't shoot the basketball for anything. And, he formed a nice little rivalry with the Nets. I didn't really like him and Embiid kind of snickering when talking to the media after the flagrant in game 2. It just put a bad taste in my mouth. I have a hard time rooting for these guys, so I do think there is a rivalry. But It was too little too late, for those 3 guys to play over 35 minutes a game. They didn't have the front court help to deal with Embiid and Harris and Butler. So that's really what the series boiled down to. Just real quick, I want to shout out Sean Marks because I know he's gotten a lot of crap for going into the referee's locker room and disputing the calls. I mean, you have to like what he did because, he got fined and suspended. Nets ownership spoke up, and Joe Tsai got himself fined $35,000. And I know I'm a Nets fan, but I just love for the first time in what feels like forever that the Nets are an actual family. They're an organization, top to bottom, players, front office staff, coaches that have each other's backs. And I think Sean Marks was setting a message, not just for this series, but for years to come that, hey, I'm not going to let anyone treat the Brooklyn Nets unfairly, call games fair. I'm not going to say that those should have been flagrant 2s, but had they would have been, it would have changed the series completely. But you just have to like that the Nets are so close-knit. It's a culture that free agents will be attracted to. It's something they haven't had in a very long time, Ben.
I completely agree, and I'm really interested to see what happens between the Sixers and the Nets because, there is a possibility, Jason, that, and I know it's not your dream possibility, but there's a possibility that Jimmy Butler switches sides on this one come next season. And And
After watching him in the playoffs, I will say I would take Jimmy Butler. If he wants to come to Brooklyn, I think my top choice, which is a no-brainer, is Kevin Durant. If the Nets could land a meeting with him, because you put Durant in a lineup with LeVert and Russell and a stretch four and Jared Allen, and that's a contender right there. I think they need to go out and try and get any one of those stud wings, KD, Leonard, or Jimmy Butler, would vault the Nets into at least perennial playoff contention.
Pooch, who we may have on a future episode, was a big fan of Tobias Harris, and I do wonder if he might be a target for the Nets, because it does feel like he would be a nice fit on the Nets, and he's closer to the age of the core. He's only 26, whereas obviously Butler's 29. He's going to turn 30 this year, and he just has a lot of miles on him. So I'm interested to see who the Nets end up pursuing. But at any rate, Jason, what do you think of the potential of this becoming a rivalry, assuming the Nets get, especially if they steal one of those guys, but if one of those guys comes to the Nets, that makes the Nets better, obviously makes the Sixers worse. Do you see this as a rivalry for a few years to come now?
I would hope so. I think it's good for basketball. Everyone in this area is clamoring for a Nets-Knicks rivalry, but they have to have a playoff series and they have to play meaningful games for that to happen. Yeah. So the Nets have a rival. I mean, they tried with the Raptors, but the Nets had a roster full of, grumpy veterans. So I think that died down. So, yeah, I mean, can you say Christmas Day game, anybody? The Knicks had the center stage at the Garden last year on Christmas. They got the doors blown off of them by the Bucks. I would like to see Nets Sixers at noon on Christmas Day from Barclays Center. I mean, that would be awesome. I might even try and go. But anyway, we have plenty of time this offseason to discuss the Nets moves. We're looking at Pooch on, as Ben just said, to kind of do a Nets post-mortem. But hats off to them. Hats off to the Sixers. The better team won. I just hope that the Sixers' depth continues to flourish if they're going to want to get past Toronto. Boban Marjanovic kind of came into his own. He kind of just grabbed the ball out of thin air and had set shot dunks, as Ian Eagle called it last night. But we were both wrong here in our predictions. We both had Sixers in 7. That ended up being Sixers in 5. But one prediction that I did get right, Benjamin, was Raptors in 5 over the Magic. I was not expecting Orlando to win Game 1. I thought they'd win Game 3, but the Raptors with a gentleman's sweep similar to the 76ers, and now they will face each other in the Eastern Conference semis. But just, I guess, your quick take on this Raptors-Magic series and then what the future holds for the series with Philly.
To be honest, Jason, I feel like we can almost put a bunch of these series in together because there are a number of series here that just weren't very interesting. And I would say if we could have a second loser of the week, or maybe it'll be kind of my heat check of the week, is the just really anticlimactic and terrible first round, Jason. I mean, it seems so promising after the game ones. We saw some upsets in the game ones. We saw the Spurs steal a game. We saw the Nets steal a game. We saw the Magic steal a game. It just felt like this might be a little bit more interesting than we had initially thought. And the Blazers were the underdog, so when they won, it felt, okay, this is going to be a fun first round. Ultimately, Jason, it went mostly chalk, and the only series that hasn't been chalk so far is the Blazers, who ended up taking the Thunder out, as we discussed, in 5 games. You look, the Raptors obviously prevail in 5 games, and really it wasn't all that close after the first game. They just handled their business from there on. The Bucks-Pistons series, I was at Game 3 in Detroit, and that was one of the worst first-round series I've ever seen. That was truly terrible. The Bucks just absolutely dismantled the Pistons. It's actually kind of a shame that the Pistons were in the playoffs at all after watching them play. They just, without Blake Griffin, they just weren't a real team. And then meanwhile, the Celtics... I
give Blake Griffin a lot of credit, though, real quick. Yeah. I saw how hobbled he looked in Game 4, and then when they finally waved their white flag and Griffin came out of the game, I mean, he is endearing himself to Pistons fans, and you have to hope they get him some help. Andre Drummond is not panning out to be that all-world NBA center that he thought he was going to be, so Blake Griffin needs some help. He's entering the back end of his prime. He's injury-prone, so if Blake Griffin's going to make much of back end of his prime, he definitely needs some help. But that was another series that I had correct. 2 for, I guess, 5 so far. I'm not going to get the Thunder. So the Nuggets close out in 6, and the Warriors and Rockets both win tonight and close out the Clippers and Jazz, respectively. I will have properly called 5 of these 8 series. So I'm going to go play Lotto.
I love it. I mean, I think it just goes to show that these series were not quite as exciting though as we thought. And ultimately, we're going to look back and I think we're going to find that only a single series